3 arrests after a police officer is shot in Northern Ireland in front of his own young son. Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell is fighting for his life after a night of violence which has rocked Omagh once again. The police said they are utterly shocked and angered by last night's calculated and brazen attack.
He was accompanied by his young son and in fact putting footballs into the boot of his car when 2 gunmen appeared, fired multiple shots. John ran a short distance and as he fell to the ground, the gunmen continued to fire shots at him.
Also this lunchtime, a record number of asylum seekers in the UK and the government's plan to tackle it, but not everyone is happy. The warning from the Environment Secretary that the fruit and veg shortage could last another month. The Labour leader's mission to restore pride and purpose in Britain, and
here in their new £3 million Adams Park Stadium. It's a lovely ground, and I'm quite certain that when the game is played on Wednesday, Peterborough will still have their hands full, but I hope it's a bit warmer.
The voice of football, John Motson, dies aged 77.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Nina Hossain.
Good afternoon. Police in Northern Ireland say Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell's son will never forget seeing his father being shot, and that the trauma inflicted on him is just horrific. The off-duty officer had just finished coaching a football match when 2 gunmen opened fire. The police described children running in sheer terror. It happened in Omagh 25 years after the town was bombed by the real IRA. This lunchtime, the Chief Constable in Northern Ireland welcomed the condemnation of the attack by political leaders across the UK and Ireland, but said it was tragic and sad that some people want to drag us back to the past. He said 3 arrests have been made and that John Caldwell remains in a critical condition after surgery overnight. Martha Fairley has the latest.
A youth football coaching session had just come to an end at this sports complex in Omagh last night. But as their coach packed up with his son, 2 masked gunmen appeared and fired multiple shots. They aimed at Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell, a high-profile senior investigating officer with 26 years' service. He's led many major investigations.
This afternoon, detectives from the major investigation team.
This was him making a public appeal after the killing of Natalie McNally in Lurgan in December. He's critical but stable after what the police described as a brazen and calculated attack.
John was finishing up from coaching an under-15s football team. He was accompanied by his young son and in fact putting footballs into the boot of his car when 2 gunmen appeared, fired multiple shots. John ran a short distance and as he fell to the ground, the gunmen continued to fire shots at him. At this time there were many other young people, children, awaiting pickup by their parents, and those children ran for cover in sheer terror towards the centre.
15 children from Omagh High School were there, many of them near to John when he was shot.
A lot of our pupils witnessed this particular attack, and secondly, a lot of our pupils were in the front line of being also attacked really there. It was a shocking experience for young children.
The Police Service of Northern Ireland has confirmed they've arrested 3 men aged 38, 45 and 47 in Omagh and Coal Island in connection with John's attempted murder.
The investigation is at an early stage. We're keeping an open mind at the moment. Our primary focus of that investigation is on violent dissident Republicans, and within that a group called New IRA.
Yesterday's attack is being condemned by politicians from all parties.
It was a cowardly and callous attack, and everybody in the policing community and actually the community of Omagh is completely shocked by this, because society has moved on in Northern Ireland. There is no place for violence like this.
This was an act of terrorism where children were here on this busy sporting complex.
This has really sent shockwaves right throughout the Killyclogher and Omagh area. People are just dumbfounded at what happened here last night. And in particular, it's not just an attack on the local police officer, it's an attack on our local community here, and we outright condemn that.
As the police investigation continues, the community is united against those who are intent on destroying peace. Martha Fairley, ITV News.
Live to Ben Chapman, who's at the scene in Omagh. Ben, the anger and shock over this attack is palpable.
Yes, it is, particularly in this town with its history of falling victim to awful terrorism. The latest here is that police have cordoned off this sports centre. You can see forensics officers doing their work. They are looking for clues both in the car park where the shooting took place, in the nearby lane and woodland. It's hard to imagine really the horror of what unfolded here last night. You can still see the open boot of John Caldwell's car that he was putting footballs into when he was approached by these two masked men and shot. The whole thing witnessed by his young son and also several other parents and children who were here. Police say they ran for cover in sheer terror as those two masked men then fired more shots, and the police say that those shots could so easily have killed or seriously injured those children. They've also paid tribute to a brave member of the public who administered first aid to John Caldwell and may well have saved his life.
And Ben, as you say, it is a town that is no stranger to such violence.
That's right, and whilst the police are keeping an open mind, their focus in their investigation is very clearly on this violent dissident Republican group calling itself the New IRA. It was responsible for a bomb attack on a police patrol just 20 miles from here last November. It is 25 years since the Good Friday Agreement and the bombing here in Omagh, which killed 29 people, but what's clear is that the threat from terrorism is still very real.
Ben Chapman, thank you very much. Thank you. There are a record number of asylum seekers waiting to hear if they can settle here. Over 160,000 people are currently trying to claim asylum, the highest number since records began. The government has decided to fast-track some applications to try to clear the backlog, which some have called an amnesty in all but name. Our political reporter Amy Lewis has more.
Hello. She has waited more than 3 years to hear if she can stay in the country she now calls home. Wan is from Malaysia and has escaped domestic abuse. She wants security for herself, but also her 2-year-old son.
We are coming here for seeking asylum for the safety reason. That's most of asylum seekers. And also we want to improve our life by contribute to the country, like work. So not coming here to be put in the hotel and stuck like 2, 3, 4 years without doing anything.
The UK's asylum backlog is more than 160,000 for the first time since records began. This was up 60% from just over 100,000 for the same period in 2021. The number of people waiting more than 6 months for an initial decision was almost 110,000 at the end of last year, up 77% on the previous year. To cut the backlog, 12,000 asylum seekers from Afghanistan, Syria, Eritrea, Libya and Yemen won't automatically have a face-to-face interview, but instead have to fill out a 10-page questionnaire. The Prime Minister has promised to stop boats crossing the Channel and cut the asylum backlog by the end of this year. But he's been accused of fast-tracking at the expense of having rigorous checks.
You've got to have an asylum system that works properly and processes claims more quickly. But on top of that, criminal gangs are running some of these asylum routes. Those channel crossings are run by criminal gangs. We have to break those gangs and bring them to justice.
The government insists the move is not a so-called asylum amnesty and have stressed thorough security checks will still be carried out.
We need to get to grips with the backlog. That is what the streamlined procedure today is all about. Absolutely, we're committed to the safety and security of this country. We'll be bringing forward legislation shortly to deal with the boats issue as well. Rishi Sunak, the whole government, Suella Braverman will all focus laser-like on getting good solutions in this area.
Britain may have left the EU, but more and more people are arriving in unprecedented numbers. The government is promising to cut the backlog for their claims, but at the moment, the figures are only growing. Amy Lewis, ITV News.
To the latest on the fruit and veg shortage in the UK now. This morning, the Environment Secretary warned the Commons the problems could last another month. Tesco, Asda, Aldi and Morrisons are rationing some fresh produce because of the shortage. Our Wales reporter Rhys Williams joins me now from Cardiff. It could be some time then before the shelves are full again.
That's right, Nina. I think any of us who have been to supermarkets over the last few days will have noticed these shortages. And as you say, the supermarkets themselves have had to take action, with Tesco, Asda, Aldi and Morrisons putting limits on some items like tomatoes, lettuce and peppers. And of course, there was hope that this could be solved or could be resolved quite quickly. But this morning, the Environment Secretary, Therese Coffey, as you say, confirming that this could go on for around a month.
We anticipate this situation will last about another 2 to 4 weeks. It's important that we try and make sure that we get alternative sourcing options, and that's why the department has already been in discussion with the retailers. It's why there'll be further discussions led by ministers as well, so that we can try and get over this and try and avoid similar situations in the future.
Now, why is this happening? The root cause does seem to be a particularly bad period of weather in southern Spain and the north of Africa, from where the UK imports almost all of its lettuces and tomatoes, for example, and it's meant that some countries like Morocco have had to limit exports to some countries while protecting its key European market. And there's been footage of fully stocked shelves of fruit and veg across countries in the European Union who aren't suffering this kind of shortages. However, there are very similar shortages being experienced in the Republic of Ireland, which of course is in the European Union, so it's not just affecting those countries outside the EU. One thing that's for certain, though, is that this is very frustrating for the supermarkets and also for customers.
Rhys Williams, thank you very much. Thank you. Next, could it be all change in men's football in England? The government has confirmed plans that the game will get an independent regulator. Why? Well, for one, to stop the big Premier League teams trying once again to form a breakaway league, to protect historic lower league clubs from going under, and to give fans more of a say in how clubs are run and by who. Will it work? Here's Pablo Taylor.
English football is one of the UK's most successful products, broadcast in more than 200 countries and watched by billions around the world. But the government says a regulator is now needed to make sure it's protected.
Their main primary function will be to ensure that clubs are sustainable, that there is stability within the pyramid, but also, really crucially, fans have a say in the future direction of their club and of the important heritage, and it will be backed up by legislation.
The new independent regulator will mean clubs must prove they are well run financially. It will create new tests to protect clubs and their fans from unscrupulous owners. There'll also be more representation for fans, giving them the power to stop owners changing things like the names and colours of clubs.
We want our Chelsea back! We want our Chelsea back!
It would also have the power to block top clubs joining breakaway leagues like the European Super League, a project which provoked passionate protests from fans when it was announced in 2021.
It was certainly not fit for purpose, and it was blatantly a cash grab from a lot of the big clubs in Europe, in order to to take their sort of elite status and then become almost a tier above any other league in football, and that's no good for the grassroots clubs.
It's hoped an independent regulator would help prevent the collapse of clubs like Bury, which was expelled from the English Football League in 2019 due to unpaid debts. Although some owners are questioning the need for a new regulator and say the financial health of clubs is already heavily scrutinised.
There's plenty of information being sent to the EFL for them to be able to assess whether a club's in trouble or not, and to raise the various questions at that time. Why you need an independent regulator to do that, I don't know. The EFL should be able to do it.
The current Qatari bid for Manchester United and the Saudi-backed takeover of Newcastle are clear signs that English football is enjoying continued success. But it is perhaps also proof that intervention is needed to help ensure fans remain at the heart of the game. Pablo Taylor, ITV News.
Ukraine has been told to expect Russian missile attacks to coincide with tomorrow's anniversary of the invasion. The warning from Ukrainian intelligence services comes as the country prepares to mark a year since the conflict began. Here, the British Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, has suggested the war could last another 12 months. Our global security editor, Rohit Kachru, spent many weeks on the ground when Russia launched its assault. He has returned to Ukraine 1 year on and spoken to people whose lives have been changed forever.
It's been 1 year. A year of nights that never end. Of smoke that never clears. When everyone reached beyond their limits just to survive.
You don't think about feelings. You just do your work. You just do anything to be alive.
And you can watch his special documentary, Life and War, Ukraine a Year on ITV1, ITVX and STV at 9 p.m. tonight. We've heard the Prime Minister's top priorities for the year ahead. Today it was the turn of the Labour leader to set out his ambitions should he get the top job. Sir Keir Starmer has 5 missions to restore pride and purpose in Britain. One is to make the country #1 for economic growth, ahead of America, Germany, France, Italy, Canada and Japan. A mission he accepts will be tough. Our deputy political editor, Anushka Asana, was watching his speech and is in Lee in Greater Manchester for us this lunchtime. What did you make of Sir Keir Starmer's big speech today?
Well, in a way, it's not about what I make of it. It's about what voters in key constituencies make of it. And that's why, after the speech, I jumped in a car and came 14 miles here west to Lee. This is a constituency that had voted Labour for almost 100 years before rejecting it in the 2019 election. Now, Keir Starmer in that speech today was arguing that these missions would help to regain trust in a place like these, that very ambitious growth target that you were talking about, but also making an NHS that's fit for purpose, raising standards in schools, having safer streets, and also becoming a clean energy superpower. He said this would drive his government. There were echoes of Tony Blair in his language, tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime. Now, critics might say, isn't some of this obvious? A politician isn't going to say, I want an NHS that is unfit for purpose. And one thing I said is that for all the long-term ambition, how is it going to change people's lives in the short term? Now, on that, he said there would be policies in each of these areas. And I guess it's on that detail that we will eventually judge this.
So, given we haven't got that detail right now, what do you think voters will make of it? Will they trust him?
Well, the question of trust did come up repeatedly this morning. Keir Starmer was asked about pledges he made when he ran for the leadership that he hasn't stuck to. For example, he had talked about nationalising the energy sector. He says, well, the world has changed because of COVID, for example, and because of Ukraine. But when he was pressed on it in the questions after his speech today, he also told the audience, well, ultimately, voters will decide.
If anyone wants to know, do the public trust and want any of this, then there's a very good way to find out. Let's have a general election. I will put my 5 long-term missions for national renewal, a decade of national renewal, up against Rishi Sunak's 5 promises to clean up his own mess, and the public can decide which of those they want.
And a key place where the public will decide is a constituency like here in Lee.
Anushka, thank you very much. Finally, the death of a football legend, not on the pitch but off it. John Motson, arguably the king of commentators, has died at the age of 77. The voice of football for so many of us. He had a career that spanned 50 years with the BBC, which saw him commentating on no less than 10 World Cups. Faye Barker on the man behind the lip mic.
The voice of football. The 93rd minute at Old Trafford. When there were massive moments. Commentator John Motson guided us through.
2-2.
Motti, as he was so often known, was the one to take fans through the highs and the lows.
He has actually, Gascoigne, got a yellow card. Oh dear me. He's going to be out of the final.
Although he was mostly heard, he wasn't often seen without his famous sheepskin coat.
Weston Martin O'Neill are going to have to wait a few days longer if
at the pitch side, whatever the weather.
Because as you can see, this part of Buckinghamshire is absolutely snowbound, and there's a bit of a gale hurtling around me now as well.
And the connection, the relationship that he formed with thousands, probably millions of people that he never met, is what makes him so special and why he's so mourned and missed today. And all I can tell those people that never got to meet him but felt they knew him is that the John Motson they heard was the real John Motson. There was no front.
In a 50-year career at the BBC, he always had the right words at the right time. From FA Cup shocks to England thrashing Germany.
Oh, this is getting better and better and better.
In total, he commentated on almost 2,500 televised games. As a football fan, his own team was non-league North London club Barnet, here in 2019, displaying just a hint of his encyclopedic knowledge.
Football's changed more than anything else, hasn't it? Barnet have been up and down. I mean, they got into the Football League. They aspired to the third tier for one season. They've been up, down twice. Now trying to get back for the third time in the National League.
Since news of his death earlier today, there have been countless tributes. The FA said his iconic voice will always be synonymous with football. Gary Lineker said he was a quite brilliant commentator and the voice of football in this country for generations. His family made the announcement with great sadness that he died peacefully in his sleep today at the age of 77. His voice forever remembered as the soundtrack to a much-loved sport. The death of John Motson at the age of 77. Mary's here later. From me, bye-bye.